The drum is an extension of our womb space. So when we create a drum or have a drum created for us with a specific intent of healing that womb space, then when we are in our moon cycle, whether or not you actually bleed, in that moon cycle, you're able to drum, release, and increase that purging aspect. So as we drum mindfully, we're drumming with an intent. We're drumming with what we're releasing, what we're activating in. Now, with our womb space, the shedding of blood or the shedding of emotions, the shedding of tears that come with hormones and fluctuations is actually our call to let go, our call to let things die. That's why we tend to want to be alone, or we're overstimulated, or everything's irritating us. Society would tell us we're just turning into a bitch because it's that time of the month. But reality is it's a time to go within and see what needs to purge from us.
Welcome to the Feminine Alchemy Podcast, where we explore the truth about the feminine, the peaceful, the wild, and the visceral. I'm your host, J.N. Behringer, joined by my co-hosts, Julie Dean Richards and Kaylee Rose. Each week, we explore the deep mysteries of the feminine and help listeners apply them to their daily lives in a practical way. Join us to unlock the hidden wisdoms your soul has been waiting for.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Feminine Alchemy. My name is Julie Dean Richards, and I am so excited for our guest today. We're going to be talking about the sacred healing drum, and we have the perfect person to talk about it with. Her name is Hollie Hope, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about her before we get started. Hollie Hope is a master teacher of integrative healing arts and sacred sound therapy. She is the author of the book, The Sacred Healing Drum, Divine Wisdoms of the Feminine Sound and the Earth. Through the beauty of perspective, she utilizes many spiritual healing gifts such as bodywork, sun quantum Reiki, and sacred perspective healing technique to support identifying and clearing negative perspectives, self-sabotage, and traumas from not just the mind, but the body and the energetic field in order to create and permeate real change. Her passion is facilitating the healing and understanding for others to activate their own unique connection with spirit and their own embodiment. Through healing her own traumas and exploring alternative methods for healing, she has come to find bliss in sharing these wisdoms through immersive healing retreats, virtual courses, and weaving sacred healing tools such as the drum. Oh my goodness, Hollie, that introduction. I'm super excited to chat with you about all of these pieces, but why don't you say hello?
Hello. I'm so excited to be on. And thank you for having all of that wisdom that you shared. And know I get really wordy sometimes. So I appreciate you taking the time to share just a little bit about me.
No, it's awesome. I love it when I get to read people's bios because I get so excited about them and I get so excited for them. And I'm really excited to hear more of your story. I've heard little bits and pieces. We connected through Kaylee Rose, who is my co-host on the podcast, who has done many of your drum circles and therapies and I think she mentioned you on the podcast like a week ago or 2 weeks ago. She was like, Hollie Hope, she's the best. So she was more than ecstatic that you're coming on. And I know you've touched so many people's lives. So I think a lot of people listening to this are like, what are we doing about drums? How do we connect it to the feminine? But I'd like to talk first. I think your story is a great story for understanding how the drum works, why drumming is connected to the feminine, and how it heals people. So do you mind telling us a little bit about how did you come to be who you are today? How did you start into this kind of integrative therapy and using the drum and other tools?
Yes, I'm excited to share, and I'm going to condense my story a little bit. There's a lot of layers, and it's definitely one that's been a lifelong process for me. It's funny, as I found the drums later in life, I went back to, man, what is it about the drums? And why did I wait until my mid-20s to discover this? When I thought about it, I realized, oh, actually, do you remember when we were a teenager and we had a bump and bass in the car and we'd turn all the treble down and we'd boom, 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 boom. So it's like the drums were always there and there was always a call. We just sometimes don't understand, or we don't give ourselves permission to fully unbridle ourselves and dive into exploring something. So for me, I grew up in a very abusive home. And from there, discovered very violent, abusive relationships, lots of sexual trauma, lots of the stuff that many of us experience and most of us don't even talk about. And then later in life, I found myself as a mother and married with the white picket fence and couldn't figure out why I couldn't get to certain parts of my healing. Something was still off. I was diagnosed with chronic depression and massive anxiety. And no matter how many times I checked something off my list of societal perfectionists and what a female is set to be, I looked at my life and I couldn't figure out why I was so miserable. And something's missing, and I couldn't find it. And around that time, I found a modality and became certified in it. And as I did, I discovered I had these gifts that I didn't know that I had because it wasn't taught to me in organized religion. It was actually the opposite. And as I started utilizing these gifts, more information started coming through spirit. And I started my practice of sacred healing perspective technique as an integrative healing arts practitioner. And basically that means that I have many modalities and whatever the person in front of me needs, that's what we utilize. I did that for 10 years and people would have change and shifts. And, I could see that, oh yeah, things are moving and things are transforming, but there's still something missing. I did all the therapies. I did so many modalities. It's ridiculous. And what I found was it was the drum that actually had been the missing piece. And I was really at a low point. Even with my healing work, I was massively suicidal. I had this wound that had been ripped open. My husband of 13 years let me know he was leaving me for another woman, and I didn't see it coming, even though we know those things, we just choose to ignore them. And I had no identity anymore. My perfect wife, perfect life was all gone. I even questioned my connection with spirit and my healing work because how could I have this much pain if I'm such a powerful healer, right? So all of this was shedding and falling apart. And I had actually ordered a drum from someone. It was just a Remo drum, and it was a synthetic drum, which would sound really good, but I hadn't played it. I had a lot of programming that said I wasn't allowed to drum. And this was from an abusive ex who was Native American and would do violent acts towards me and tell me it was just because they were doing to the white men what they did to our women. So it was almost this act of racism and hate. But then he did proceed to do it to Native women. So now I can see that that was a distortion. But I believed it. And anytime there's anything related to Native culture, I resisted it and I wouldn't touch it. So I had wanted this drum, but then his voice was still kind of in my head saying, you're not allowed to have this. Now, my mom grew up on the Blackfoot Reservation. And so there is some Native in our bloodline, but it's a very, very small amount. And it was something that was always very much in my life. And I had this really hard time with it. And around this dark time, I went to a drum circle, and it was held for awareness for suicide for those who had been through veteran wars. It was to help prevent and bring togetherness. When we arrived, I was not in a really good emotional state. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I didn't want anybody to look at me. I was like, okay, I'll just be awkward in the corner. And then somebody had me sit down at this huge powwow drum. And they said, hey, you should drum. And I said, oh, no. Because in my mind, I still have this program. It's not for me. It's not for me. And they handed me a drumstick and told me to drum. And I'm looking at this big drum like, I don't know how to do this. I'm so awkward. I'm so uncomfortable. I just want to leave. Why am I even here? And all those dark thoughts started coming through. And then other people around were drumming, and the actual powwow portion and the singing had ended. So it was literally just as they were packing up. They're like, hey, play. And I was like, no. And after about the third time, somebody's like, hey, Hollie, why don't you play? I finally said, okay, it's now more awkward for me to protest why I don't want to drum than just to hit the dang drum. So I picked up the stick and I whomped it, and a crazy sensation happened. It was something that I still have a hard time explaining, even though I have explained it several times. It was like a bolt of lightning shot from the bottom of the drum into the earth, up through my bare feet. And I could feel like all of my nerves felt like they were on fire, and almost as if it was channeling up through my nervous system. And then at my heart, I felt this hard pressure that cracked open. And it was like something, I'm even getting goosebumps as I talk about it. It was like something activated and opened and erupted from inside of me. I didn't know whether I wanted to cry or laugh or scream. Like somebody even took a picture and my mouth is so big, you can see all of the fillings on the sides of the back of my teeth. Like I look like a hyena. And I was like, what? Is that even me? Like it didn't even look like me because there was this eruption that happened. So for me, that was the moment when the drum said, hey, you're here. Come with me. Let's open this up. And after that, I couldn't ignore it anymore. So I remembered the drum that I had ordered and it had been sitting there. And I finally picked it up and I drummed it at home. And I began drumming with it every single day until I could get one breath, just drum, drum, drum. And sometimes I would cry, sometimes I would scream, but I didn't want to breathe. I didn't want to open up that heart center. Through this drum for the next 30 days, it got me to a stable place where my nervous system could handle what was happening in my world. And then soon after that, I got to weave my first drum. It wasn't the most pleasant experience. I felt abandoned and alone and frustrated. And my drum is actually destroyed, not by choice. So she doesn't drum anymore, but I still have her. And then later, when I sat with the drum, I wanted to make a new one. And I had materials that were ethically sourced from a woman who works for the Fish and Game. So she gets rawhide. She knows who harvested the animal, where it came from. And I wanted the purest, most clear source possible. And as I began to practice weaving drums, I noticed that these beings started showing up. This is a part that I don't normally share in my story, but I feel called to share it. So I am. These non-physical grandmothers is what I call them. And they walked me through how to weave the drum. They walked me through the different ties. They spoke to me what the animals represent. And so, a lot of people ask, well, where did you learn this? And I'm like, in the dirt outside with non-physical grandmother spirits. And the more research I did, the more I found that we actually have drums in every culture, in every primal civilization. There's an amazing book by Lainey Redmond called When the Women Were Drummers. And she actually found archaeological finds of women who were drumming. The interesting thing is I found this book and I was like, oh my goodness, yes, she's speaking my language. I love this. I have to meet her. And then I found out she passed away the same year that I discovered the drums. And so I'm like, maybe I've been channeling Lainey. I don't know, but maybe she's one of those people who showed up. It's fun to speculate. I don't know for sure. So that's kind of how the drums found me and are now in everything I do. And even my little grandbaby comes and drums every single morning with me. And I have to say he's a better drummer than I am. He keeps rhythm a lot more in flow than I do. So yeah, that's kind of how they came to be.
Wow. That's an amazing story. It really is. I love hearing all the pieces and parts. And like you said, I can tell there are lots and lots of layers to what you received and when you received it and how this all comes together. But I really love hearing how the pieces have healed you, how that one experience, isn't it so crazy? Like one tiny thing, like that one bang on the drum can change your entire life. Right? Like one moment. And I love hearing that with you. And I love this image also of you just drumming and drumming and breathing and drumming and letting a scream out. And because that's been a lot of my experience with the drum, like it helps us access a lot of those primal parts of ourselves that we have forgotten. And that's what I wanted to say when you were talking about Native culture and this idea, like we're not allowed to use drums because we're not Native American and it's not part of our culture. But like you said, drumming is part of every single culture. Like you can go to the Celtic region and they make drums, and you can go to Africa and they make drums, and you can go to China and they make drums. Every part of the world makes drums. And there's just something about that rhythm that's so important and healing to us, which is what you've experienced. So I would love to dive in a little bit more of how does it work? Like, how do you think drumming, and this doesn't have to be just like a scientific answer, but like, how do you think that drumming can really help heal somebody like you?
Yeah. And I love that answer. And there'll probably be sciencey stuff in there. Like, I love the big fancy words, but I feel like when we talk about healing anything, allowing ourselves to level it down to where our unconscious can understand and our human brain can make sense of it is the most important. So one of the powerful things with the drum is when we are in utero, we all came from a womb. As far as we know, we all existed in this state where our human vessel was being formed. And as it was being formed, it was accompanied with our very first experience as a human, which is boom, 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 that heartbeat of our mother. So with the sound rhythms that are flowing through, our cells at the time were aligning and multiplying with their highest, most perfect form. We are developing, we're creating new cells. And so the drum has so many layers of what it supports. One of them is that emotional process of being in that safe container in the womb, which is also why some people, drums actually make them feel panicked, because perhaps when they were in the womb, they weren't getting the nutrients they need. Perhaps their mother was under a lot of stress, and every emotion that the mother feels, the baby's going to feel. And so I've had people who are like, it just makes me so uneasy, because they had an uneasy in utero experience. But for most of us, even at that time, even if there was uneasy scenarios around, there's probably a lot more later in life, that was when our body did feel like it was coming into this human form. And within your cells, every cell has its own gate, and the gates open and they close. And as they open and close, they're able to open, releasing toxins, releasing old programs, releasing anything that's not serving the health of the cell. And they're able to receive nutrients and light and any positive energy that's coming in. Now, when we go through catastrophic illnesses, when we go through crisis, when we go through trauma, those gates of those cells stop opening and closing and begin to slow and even completely decay and no longer allow any transition of nutrients to come through. When this happens, we have mutated cells that start to replicate instead of the highest, most perfect form. When we drum, it actually stimulates those gates to start opening and closing again, so that our body is able to align with its highest, most perfect form and begin healing itself, because our body can heal everything within it. The drums activate and stimulate that. Another thing they do is they increase your brain matter, especially the white brain matter, which helps with cognitive function, and it helps your memory. And they've used it in studies with Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, because it actually helps the hemispheres to communicate to each other. So we have mental clarity that comes in. We have emotional updating that happens. We have reduction in pain by softening those muscles through vibration. Absolutely. We can talk about womb cycles in the drum, because that's really powerful. They help to reduce stress, especially anxiety and depression, because depression slows the process and you want to stop, so it creates movement. And anxiety is a call to have more movement. You're in panic mode. You need to take action. And the drum helps to absorb and move a lot of that energy and a lot of that emotion. It can also allow you to go into a trance state where you can get divine inspiration and enlightenment from your own spiritual guides or your own connection with God, source, universe. It also connects us in with that steady heartbeat, so that we can feel comfort, especially those of us who don't have a great relationship with our own parents. It can allow us to feel that comforting sensation that we need, and to reprogram a lot of the unconscious programming that's remaining, because it's able to bypass human vocabulary. So a lot of people are like, I don't know why, but all of a sudden I'm crying and I don't have a reason. And it's like, because you don't need words, because the moments of most of our childhood trauma is when we don't have words to describe it. And some things we experience are so shocking to the system that we can't formulate those words, and our brain can't comprehend what's happening. But with vibration and sound, you're able to hit those points and rewire the entire human body. So I love drums for that, and the self-expression of being heard and seen, and you can't do it wrong either. So that's one of my favorite things about it.
I love all of that. I love hearing all the pieces of how drumming scientifically really helps us and spiritually helps us. I think going back to that sound of the womb, that heartbeat, it's the heartbeat of everything. That's part of the reason it feels so primal. I have also met people who are scared of drumming, right? Like there's something scary about it to them. And I think it is, like you said, it's bringing up old trauma. It's bringing up things as your cells are opening that you've forgotten. And that can be really hard for people. Recently, I was just running a retreat with Kaylee, and we did a lot of drum circles. We did a lot of drumming, and one of the women had a really visceral experience to being drummed, everyone drumming her, and she cried a lot. She really needed to break up all that old energy, and she was like, I don't know what's happening to me. And we're like, it's okay, it bypasses words. Like you said, we don't have to put words to everything. I think that's why drums are so beautiful. And afterwards, after that experience, she was like, that's the most sacred experience I've ever felt. It was so sacred to me. It was so healing to me, even though at the time it was at first disconcerting. And that happens to a lot of us because we're not used to emotion coming through. We're not used to our body. That's why somatics is so powerful as well, because it bypasses the words. So I love hearing all of that. And I would love to go dig deeper into the kinds of, healing that drums can help us with, including womb cycles and healing, women going through their cycle. So let's talk a little bit about that. Like, how do drums help us with that? How are they connected to healing those processes?
Well, and especially the drum itself is considered a womb space. If you look at the drum's container, it is a bag that is holding space. And if we think of what an anatomical uterus is, it's a bag that's holding space, right? And so we receive some type of activation. This is where I go into a lot of puns because you use a wooden drumstick to activate the feminine drum. So you bang your drum, and it's really fun to kind of think about like, oh, my drum would like to bang herself with my hand, and now I would like to use a wood stick. But with all of that, it helps us to have that visual of that masculine feminine dance. So when people have this resistance to the drum, usually there is a resistance to their own femininity. There is a resistance to being nurtured by other women. Anciently, it was the women that would encircle you and drum you, not because the men couldn't, but because they were protecting and providing and weren't readily available. And, back in matriarchal societies, we were able to have that feminine container of healing. Now, when we have wounds of the feminine, then that's when we resist it a lot. And with these traumatic experiences that we've encountered, when we have to face them and be witnessed by them, there is a lot of resistance that comes in. And one of the things the drums do is it releases the resistance. It releases the holding on. So as we specifically talk about womb cycles, the womb cycle is a series where each month we get to have this death and this rebirth. We get to have a release and then cultivate new space to create new life. The feminine receives first, and then she creates from what she's receiving. So if we have resistance to receiving, then we can resist wanting to be nurtured, wanting to be taken care of. With the drum itself, it calls in that receiving. Let me say that differently. I think I'm being directed in a direction that's a little bit different. And I keep resisting it as we're talking about resistance. So I'm just going to go. And so it's interesting because in some cultures, women weren't allowed to drum. It was the man's job to drum. And they use the terminology of, well, the drum represents a womb. Women already have the womb, so the men get to drum. And it's actually the drum is an extension of our womb space. So when we create a drum or have a drum created for us with a specific intent of healing that womb space, then when we are in our moon cycle, whether or not you actually bleed and have an intact uterus, because we still cycle with the moon regardless through the phases of the feminine, in that moon cycle, you're able to drum, release, and increase that purging aspect. So as we drum mindfully, we're drumming with an intent. We're drumming with what we're releasing, what we're activating in. Now, with our womb space, the shedding of blood or the shedding of emotions, the shedding of tears that come with hormones and fluctuations is actually our call to let go, our call to let things die. That's why we tend to want to be alone, or we're overstimulated, or everything's irritating us. Society would tell us we're just turning into a bitch because it's that time of the month. But reality is it's a time to go within and see what needs to purge from us. So the drum helps with the purge. The vibrations can actually help with, I like to call them surges, not cramps, because cramps mean it's confining and holding, where a surge means it's pushing and easing and releasing out. So drumming while you're having those surging sensations in your uterus can actually soften the process and allow the tissue to expel from your body with more grace and ease. So typically I will actually lay, kind of, make myself comfy on pillows or whatever I need. And I'll actually hold the drum with the handle facing towards my crotch area, my groin, my yoni, and I'll actually reach my hand around the front and I actually drum my yoni, and it instantly will shift any tightness, any tension, and it allows it to flow. But what it's also doing is connecting me in with anything unconscious that needs to move with that bleed, with that flow, so that I can have that space and set aside that time that's just for me to go within and be able to let those parts of me die and all the mourning that comes in with things we didn't create in the last month, and then to be able to have a clean slate again.
That's really powerful. I love the idea. And for people who the concept of being drummed is foreign for them, when you're being drummed, it just means that you are receiving the vibration from the drum in certain areas or in your body. So when Hollie is talking about drumming her yoni, she's making it so that she can feel the vibrations in that part of her body and that it's affecting those. I think that's super cool. A great idea. I love this idea of like the release and helping with the flow and helping things come up. It's interesting because I recently had an experience with this myself because my cycles, I've always been really like clockwork, 28-day cycle, really on target. And then for a few cycles, all of a sudden I started to have this bleed, and then I'd stop bleeding for 2 days and I'd bleed for 2 more days. So my progesterone wasn't like dropping properly or evenly, but it happened for 4 cycles. One cycle is like, it's a one-off, right? But like after 4 cycles, you're like, it's not a one-off. Something's happening. And I happened to be with a group of women who all had drums, and I asked them if they would drum me with the intention of clearing out my womb and helping me with that. And it was a really powerful experience for me. When you're using a drum, like we talked about, emotions can come out that you don't expect and you can feel things. And for me, I felt like I had to sing. There was no way to stop the song from coming out of I cannot explain it to anyone. And I'm sure you understand, right? It's exactly what you're talking about, that electricity of there's literally no way to stop these words from coming out of my mouth. It is not possible for me not to sing this song. And I did. And after that experience with those drums, my cycle normalized again, like instantly. And I haven't had a problem with it since. So it's real. It really works.
I really love that your throat activated, because one of the things that we don't realize is that the throat and the yoni are actually very similar organs and they're directly connected. So they also teach sensual embodiment and orgasms and all those things. And when I talk about activating your yoni and allowing your orgasms to roll through your body, the requirement is that your mouth is open and your jaw is soft. Because if you have a tense mouth and jaw, things don't release. And drumming all the time, we'll do drum ceremonies where somebody will have their mouth closed and we walk over and we tap them on the chin or literally open their mouth, like open your mouth, because it can be held and trapped there. And we think of the 2 energy centers that are shut down the most societally in the last thousands of years with women. It's their sexuality and their voice. Isn't it interesting that those are the 2 shut down and they're linked? So the more we can speak up and allow that energy center to clear, the stronger we'll be as a connection of ourselves. There is a process, I actually call it primal purge process. And it's where when something is stored in your body that needs to release, it's a very somatic way. Some people are like, oh, it's light language. I'm like, it's different from light language because light language is pulling information from the stars into yourself. Primal purge is speaking to the ancient DNA that's already in there, those programs, and allowing it to be expressed. So sometimes I've made sounds and I'm like, I didn't know I can make that sound. Like, whoa, what was that? I can't even try to hit that note if I want to, whether deep or I've done some that are really high. And when I'm working with someone, I can hear what their body needs to hear. And so usually we'll breathe with them because there's breaths you can do that will move through certain energy centers. And if it's not moving, the powerful thing about a circle and having a group that are in tune and focused solely on you releasing whatever it is, even if they just met you and you're a complete stranger, all of their energy and intent is going into supporting you and building this momentum of frequency so that you can heal it. So sometimes we'll actually start making the sounds. And I've had people say, you even said this, and that's what I was hearing in my head. And then you spoke it. And I'm like, yeah, maybe next time you can speak it, because that would be nice. And we've even had times where people are vomiting that aren't even the ones being drummed, but they're channeling that frequency. Because one of the big pieces of the drum is it holds a frequency. So the frequency you're holding when you weave a drum or when it's woven for you is a place where you can always drum, and it will invite you to bridge up to that frequency again. And so when we have a circle of people, or even when we're with ourselves, we're connecting in with a frequency that we set an intent. Each time we drum and we raise our frequency, the drum raises with us. That's why people are very particular in drumming each other's drums and asking permission before you do, because it's holding a frequency. It's holding a state of being with emotional imprints and codes or whatever you worked with, plus the spirit of that animal. So you have all of this information that's at play that's beyond the 3D. And that's why it's so impactful when we are experiencing those ceremonies and we're having those visceral reactions. One of my really fun games I love to play is when I do a ceremony, I'll have drums out and I don't really tell people what hide they are or anything specific about the intent. Then everyone selects the drum they want to play if they don't already have their own. And then we go around and I tell them what drum they picked and what the medicine that was imprinted into the drum. And you would not believe how many people are in shock and tears or delighted, like, oh, of course I picked the one of healing childhood sexual trauma. Like, of course. And I'm like, yeah, and here's the symbol. But it picked you as well. And being able to see that intuition and trust the intuition creates a space where we can trust ourselves. Another thing I really love is I was once at a sound bath, and during the sound bath, the instructor said, if any sound I play causes a discomfort in your body, please step out and sit for a minute and then come back in when the sensation goes away. And she explained that she once had this pain in her uterus, like of all places. Like, I'm like, hi, that's my jam. And so she had to step out. And as soon as she stepped out, it stopped. Now, everybody views healing differently. But for me in the work I've seen, when there is a discomfort in the body, it's because something is not in alignment with the frequency that's being offered. And it could be that it's not in alignment for you. And you're like, ooh, this is some yucky energy I don't like. And perhaps that is true. Most likely, however, it's that it's offering a frequency that you don't know how to receive, or there's trauma in the way, or there's something else going on and your cells aren't syncing in with the frequency. So rather than shutting it down, cutting it off, suppressing it, depressing it, moving away from it, the invitation is, if you have those sensations, to send breath there. Maybe put your hands on the spot in your body. Tell your body, it's okay, we can let this go. Or even I tell people, gesture with big finger pointing, help at this spot, and allow them to work it. You can use rattles and different sounds to get the frequency to activate in a different way. But that's a frequency that's being offered. And if we allow ourselves to receive it, we can receive that upgrade. And it's really powerful when you see the resistance that comes in and it's like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to feel this. I don't like this. I've shut it down. I mean, coming from me, I used to be a master emotional stuffer, which is why I was diagnosed, I feel like, with endometriosis at a very young age. And they even said, oh, after you have kids, it'll be fine. It got worse with each child. And that was partially because I was stuffing and holding on to all of the emotions and all of the traumas. And my uterine lining was also holding on to everything and it didn't want to release. I don't have any of those symptoms now for at least 10 years. And part of that is because I just was so used to holding things. So if you feel discomfort, if you feel pain or sensation, move your body, make a sound, maybe open your mouth and let yourself vomit. If you feel like you need to, grab a trash can or just say, hey, I'm going to vomit. Somebody give me something. It's nice when it's outside and you can just offer it to the earth. But those things actually happen. I've had people who lose control of their bladder. And then I've also had people who don't have any of the physical responses too. It still works even if you don't. Some of us need that physical because of whatever we're working through, or we're more of a physical learning experience type of human rather than traveling outside of our body. Some people leave their bodies, and so they don't have any of the physical sensations because they're not even in their body. They're off dancing in the cosmos. And so understanding that the journey with the drum looks different for everyone, but the common thread is, do you feel safe enough to let yourself go and to give yourself the full experience and let it be as deep as you can allow it? Usually the first time isn't quite as deep as the other times. Once you see that you're safe in that experience, then you can allow yourself to unfold a little bit more and get a deeper sensation and get deeper healings within your cells, especially.
Thank you for talking about all of that, because I think so many people will benefit from everything you said. And it's interesting because right now my husband's reading this book called The Obstacle is the Way, which is really interesting with what you're talking about, this idea of resistance, and what you resist persists, continues inside your body until you let it go. And for a lot of people, I think hearing this, they're like, I don't want to do this. Like, I'm scared. You know, it makes me scared to like drum because what if I throw up? You know, I don't want to throw up. What if this happens to me? What if I cry? What if I have some kind of shaking reaction? What happens? And I just want to say, for everyone who's, you know, it sounds daunting or scary, it's actually, it's like shadow work. Like, it's never as bad as you think it's gonna be. It actually hurts more to resist it than to actually do it. You know, the obstacle is the way. Like, if you're feeling that resistance, then that's a clue to you that that's probably something you need. So I really love that you talked about, this idea, like if you feel the pain, we are as humans, we're so scared of pain. We're so scared of it. But like the pain is the way, the feeling is trying to tell you something and it's trying to help you. But we're so bad at it. Like listening to you, I'm like, yes, like I've had times where I've been able to step into that. And even just recently, I've had times where I'm like, oh, when will this pain go away? Like, just go away. I don't want to feel you. I don't want to deal with you. I don't want to deal with what I'm feeling. But it makes such a huge difference to let it through.
Pain is inevitable, but suffering is a choice. And
Yes.
so I really love that phrase. I think it's by Not Khan, and I'm saying it wrong, but yeah. That I go by a lot because it's like this discomfort that comes in. There's a difference between discomfort and a call to face something. And I really don't love the phrase, outside of your comfort zone is where growth happens. It's like, well, technically it's you showing up and choosing to grow is where your growth happens. And the more nurturing you can allow yourself in that journey is the more you'll be able to grow and expand. And so there are things you can do if you feel the resistance to like, oh, I don't know if I can let myself go like that. Well, one of the things you can do for your 3D human mind to feel safe is make sure that you're at a ceremony or a circle where somebody is educated and trauma informed. I have heard stories of people who have been traumatized in a corner in the fetal position and everybody packs up and goes and they're left because the circuit didn't get complete. And so there are ways to make sure that you're safe in that space. And if you don't feel safe, then you don't have to be there. You can always choose out. You can always step out. The nice thing about being in a trans experience with a drum is that you can always stop the sound. I've heard of people who do a lot of plant medicine journeys and they're like, you're in it. You can't ever escape. You can't choose out. So the nice thing is for me and so my healing journey and the levels of safety that I needed, I was able to experience things with the drum that I still had a sense of control. I could still choose out at any moment. I could still open my eyes and be like, nope, this is weird. I'm not doing it. Walk away. And for me, that was a lot of safety because I wanted to be able to shut it off if I needed to. But just doing your research and making sure that the person facilitating this space is trauma informed and that they are able to hold that space for you creates the safety where you will let yourself go. And if you're not safe where you feel like you're unsure of it, then you're only going to hit the surface. Even hitting the surface is still such a high vibration and it can still move a lot. So it's not something that we actually need to be afraid of. And sometimes even just stepping into the center is the work itself. Like I am stepping into a circle of people and I am letting them drum me. Even if you don't speak, just that being seen sometimes is as healing as having a deep experience and vomiting on the floor and screaming to the point where everybody looks at the facilitator and goes, are we okay? I once had somebody recently, we were talking on a podcast and she had mentioned she thought she was having a heart attack, her first drum experience. And she even said, Hollie, get an ambulance. You have lives at stake. Like this is a heart attack. And I was like, Spirit says, no, this is your heart opening. And, being able to be in the space where someone can hold that space is really important. And just to be mindful of it as well. If you are one of those that's leery, but some of us are like, I'm all for it. Let me go in. Let's see how wild and open I can get because I'm really sick and tired of carrying this suffering and it's time to be done and move on and have a death and a rebirth so that I can have a different experience.
Yeah, I think that's really important to think about. You can carry the suffering as long as you want, but whenever you're ready to let go, you can let go. And I do think the safe environment piece is really important. I love that you brought up, like with a drum, you can literally stop drumming anytime. You are the one holding the stick. You're the one who decides how much you drum. And Kaylee and I talk about this a lot, but this principle of titration in that it's used in somatics and this idea of going to the tender edge. You don't have to completely throw yourself off of the deep end. You can go to just your tender edge. You can give yourself the nourishment. And when I say tender edge, what I mean by that is you can go to a place that feels uncomfortable, but not so uncomfortable you feel traumatized by it. Because sometimes those, like you said, if you're not in the right environment, those traumatic experiences can be so much for your nervous system and make you feel like you have to tighten up even more. So I love that you brought up all of those safety pieces. But if you are ready and you're ready to experience all of that, it's honestly a great way to let go. And we're so used to not being able to be wild, not being able to release fully, that it seems scary. That's the thing. It's like, it's scary to us because there's no boxes on it. And like, we have boxes on everything. And like, we have this box that says this is okay and that's okay. And this is not okay. But getting rid of those, it's like the feminine itself. You step into the dark and you just don't know what's in there. And that really scares people. But I find that this idea, this ability to be wild is so healing for people. And I think the drum really brings that out because it touches each of the primal in us, like we've talked about. So thank you so much for bringing that up, because we've been talking about the way that you talk about drums is probably different than the way most people have ever thought about a drum. You talk about them like a partner, you talk about them like a person, and that they choose you and you choose the drum and the drum chooses you. So I'd love to talk about that a little bit more. And like you've mentioned, there are different medicines, like each drum holds a medicine. What does that mean? And I wanted to say, Hollie, okay, so I haven't read your entire book, but I've read big portions of your book, and I've read the portions about each animal hide and what it means. And I've like fact checked it. Like I went through and looked at other people's interpretations and it holds up. So I think it's amazing that you were able to channel all of that, like be taught that by those grandmothers. But it agrees with everything else all these other cultures say about that. I just wanted to throw that in there. So what is the medicine of a drum? Why do you talk to a drum like it's your partner? And what are some of the different things that different hides can do for you?
Yeah. So, the drum itself is a symbol of death and rebirth. And literally when we drum, each time we drum can be a death and a rebirth. So the animal of the drum, when we have a drum that we've received rawhide for, I do voice a lot about ethically sourced, because some people are like, oh, here, I can get you rawhide and I just bought this online. And I'm like, okay, well, where did the animal live? Were they happy? What were they around? And a lot of people don't think about that, because this animal is a being. And I have being careful with my words because I don't want to be hurtful to anyone, but I get a lot of messages from a lot of foreign countries. And I finally had one that I'm like, okay, we're going to run with this, because just because you're in a different country doesn't mean it's not ethically sourced. It might be very ethically sourced. This might be your goats that are in your backyard and you love on every day. I don't know. So I'm reaching out and asking questions. He's like, oh, well, I just go to the market and there's a stack of rawhides there and I just buy them from the market. I'm like, okay, well, where did the animals live? Can you tell me what area you're in? And then I researched, I'm like, nope, that's not for me. Because if I make a drum out of a sad and miserable cow, then I have sad and miserable cow energy that I am drumming all the time. Now, I once got a rawhide because a friend of mine had a cow that they got for meat. And they're like, hey, the butcher just throws the rawhide away. Would you like it? And I said, sure, I'm open to it. It's a gift. It's been offered to me. I will receive that. And I go to wrap it on a drum and I notice there's a brand, like the burn scar. And my heart broke. And I was like, oh, I don't want this on my drum. So I took it off. Then I sat with it and I'm like, but I feel like that's supposed to go on this drum. So I soaked the rawhide again and I began again. And it was like, nope, I can't do it. And my own head was in the way because I'm mad. And I notice I'm mad. And if I'm mad weaving a drum, I'm now imprinting being mad and furious that this cow who could have had an ear tag had a burn in their body being claimed. And I'm like, no, I don't like that. I feel like I was claimed at times. I don't want this drum. And I had to really sit with it. So I soaked the rawhide. I did a crystal grid and a mandala of offerings and flowers and just sitting with the animal. And I'm like, why are you here in my world? Why am I looking at this? What more can I learn through this? And the answer came, well, if the cow had a sad and miserable life and had this abuse, which I feel like for me personally, I'm like, oh, we're the same. Your cow, which represents the womb, and you had abuse, you were burned. Guess what? My womb's been burned. Okay, I see that we're the same. And then the answer came, well, cow is representative of alchemy, taking something raw and turning it into something else. So the cow takes water, turns it into blood by giving birth, and then into milk. And the cow spoke, but it's more of a feeling and thoughts in my mind to me and said, let's alchemize this, alchemize my being. So I did continue with that energy and wove the drum. I had that drum until it ripped, and it ripped right where the scar was. And it was because somebody sat on the drum with their womb and we drummed them while it happened. And it's like, that's okay. If this drum gets ripped, it's meant to be because this healing is for you and the cow is willing to offer it. And then I ended up moving it to a smaller hoop. And I love to repair in death and rebirth the parts. So that cow is still with me, but it was such a powerful message of allowing each death and rebirth to be part of the process. So that particular drum and what it's been rebirthed again for, I use anytime somebody feels like they're scarred and they're wounded and they want to have it be different and not have everyone only seeing them for their scar. And so each drum becomes its unique partner through the medicine it carries and then the standard that the animal represents. So when you make a drum and you honor the animal, you do the drum blessing with the animal, and you think of the animal each time you drum, it's like invoking that spirit of that animal and all of the medicine that they have. And it gives the animal a rebirth as well as you a rebirth. So it's kind of like you have an addition of spirit guides, which is probably why I have so many that are around me all the time, because it's all the animals with all the drums. And so it's really nice to have that medicine. Another one I love is deer, because deer helps with the circulatory system, which the drum is known for helping the circulatory system, regardless of which animal hide you do. But the deer especially connects with that law of karma. And every time you need something, giving some of it, allowing it to magnify and come back to you. And the deer is the heart center. So it's the softness. It's a higher tone typically. So then you're getting the sound, where cow tends to be a lower tone that hits that C note around where your sacral is. And so you can play with the different rawhides and have a sound that represents a certain spot in your body and helps to activate, but also the medicine that helps to activate. And so you can even have a heart deer drum that has a lower vibration and a lower sound with a thicker hide that drops it down into the sacrum so that you're having your heart connect with your womb space. And then they're on the same page. So, I love goat too. Goat helps with the throat, which helps you to voice things. So singing with goat, even as you drum, you can speak into the drum things that you are wanting to manifest or things that need to erupt from you that maybe you can't speak to. Say you have hard words that you never spoke to anybody, or maybe somebody you love that passed away and you can't talk to anymore. You can speak it into the drum or speak it while you drum. And it actually helps to hit those parts because your brain and your mind are able to comprehend what you are releasing and what you are doing with that. And when we have rituals and symbols and even animal medicine, it's a reminder so that our mind can comprehend the things that are outside of 3D so that we can have those deeper experiences and the rest of us can be on board so that our mind, our body, and our emotional body are all on the same page, which is often something we forget. Even when we drum, it's not just for the physical, it's for all of the parts.
I love that. I love that you're bringing all of that together and speaking about the different medicines and how they come together in your story about the cow or I don't know if it was cow, but the hide that had been burned and how that became a blessing, became alchemy for you to do that. I think that's really beautiful. And I will say, I've made drums before, and it does feel like birthing a baby in so many ways. You really are, everything you put into that. It's hard to explain unless you do it, but I've found that everyone who does it, you do feel the energy of that animal as you create it. And when you tie a drum, you usually are tying it with hide as well, with part of the animal, you're tying it. And that part of the animal, that skin, feels so much like an umbilical cord for anyone who's felt an umbilical cord. So it really does feel like, okay, I'm birthing this thing into reality. And it does have its own energy and its own presence and its own medicine that it gives, something that it reminds us, like you said, that energy that it brings us, which I think is really powerful and beautiful. So you said cow is connected to the womb, deer connected to the your bloodstream, yeah, well, and your heart. Yeah. Yes, your heart, and then the goat for the throat. And then I know buffalo is a lot about abundance, that abundance piece, and bringing that in. Any other ones that you want to talk about?
Buffalo is also the strength and support. It's what allows you to have that lifting system. It's the root. It works really well with ancestral work. If you think of how massive a buffalo is, I recently was gifted an African buffalo, which is bigger than the buffaloes we have in the US. And it was so heavy with water, I couldn't even lift it onto my rack. And so I'm like, okay, buffalo is so rooted. This is so meaty and heavy. And even just the experience of preparing the rawhide really connects in with the energy of it, because Goat is one of the very light ones. Bear is the higher heart and that mama bear love and nurturing. And then also elk. I love elk. Elk is stamina. It's the solar plexus. It's self-identity. It's knowing that you can move through anything as long as you know who you are and allow yourself to be seen and in your stature. We have horse, which is your relationship with the same sex. So your feminine relationships, if you're feminine, and then also like your sexuality is horse. So it's interesting because every time there's a horse, I'm always very observant of how the process goes, because you have people who are like, my horse is wound too tight and I hate the way it sounds. I'm like, ooh, are we sexually wound a little tight and we're frustrated and we're trying to control things? Oh my gosh, yeah. Okay, well, let's let your drum teach you. And then there's also times where horse especially is very sensitive to temperature and humidity. So it will want to play sometimes and just decide it's not going to play today. And I'm like, yes, because it's about your expression and being able to see when you run wild and when it's time to be in a herd or a group. So I love horse for that as well. And then moose is a lot about being seen as well and really claiming that stature. I once was drumming with moose in the mountains. And as I'm drumming with a moose drum, a juvenile male moose shows up. And I thought it was a deer. And I'm like, oh my goodness, a deer. And I peek over and it's this giant moose. And it's just like right on the porch of the cabin. And I was like, well, do I keep drumming or do I stop? I decided to keep drumming. I'm like, I'm not going to be weird. Don't be weird, Holly. Don't be weird. I'm like, but maybe you want to smell it. No, you don't want to smell it. Okay, you're going. Okay, bye. It was, because moose are known to be a little bit dangerous, but I think it's mostly if there's a threat, moose comes in and it protects. And so I love my moose drum. Even when I'm feeling a little bit more vulnerable, a lot of times I'll drum with my moose drum and allow myself to feel that, oh no, you're safe because you know who you are. You're safe because you have that gift of discernment to know, that most people aren't trying to do something maliciously and having understanding. And so moose helps a lot with that as well. So yeah. I love the drum, all of them. They're all very special. And even just knowing what the animal is can be very healing. But the more you get to connect with them, the drums being in the water, when you pull your rawhide out of the water, the person weaving the drum pulls it out because they're the ones giving birth and they get that umbilical cord lacing. And then the lacing, as it's woven, there is a pattern to it because you want to go to the different directions. You want to weave in different parts of yourself, even honoring the parts that maybe were painful, but seeing that they were necessary to gain wisdom. So there's a lot of healing that happens there. And especially with every drum that is ever woven is imperfect, and it's letting it be imperfect and still perfect in that, because there is no perfect unless you're putting it in a box. Which is why all the drums I make are circular, not box. I've had people ask me, will you make a box drum? I'm like, nope, I don't fit in a box, and you shouldn't try and fit this rawhide in a box either. So we're going to be round because it represents the circle that we're all connected with.
Oh, I love that. All of that is so beautiful. I love hearing all about the different rawhides, and it is so true that lacing your intentions into it and releasing and just all the different pieces of it really make a difference in what you're making. And I think it's so foreign to us, this idea. I've said this before on another episode, but we're really good about fake stuff. Like, we're really good at buying fake stuff. We're really great about like bringing fake stuff into our house and like plastic stuff everywhere. And not that there's not a place for those things or that they don't have a use, but natural stuff is very foreign to us. We're not used to bringing that in. And we're also not used to this idea that the things that we make have like an identity and they have an energy and they have something that's connected to us. And when you're working, especially with an animal, right, with another really natural being, because you could say that as, I've heard people who whittle things or who carve things, right? Like you bring it to life, right? The tree or whatever you're using, the stone has a life of its own. And it's the same thing when you're making this drum. This animal had a life, and that life is in that. And what you bring to life also is part of that drum and how beautiful it is. I love your experience with the moose also. And this is like a silly question. Are there any exotic animals that you have ever worked with creating a drum? And also, is it possible? Would it be possible to make an alligator drum? I don't know if that's possible. Is that possible?
It is, as long as it's not been processed into leather yet. So like I do have some frog leather, toad leather. So to process the rawhide, because a lot of people are like, oh, I have this leather, you can use it to make drums. There's a process to take the skin of the animal and soften it to make it more like a fabric. Once it's fabric, it won't have any sound. So if you can get the alligator skin pre-dried out and brittle, but not quite leather yet, yes, you can. You can even do it with stingray. Yeah. I have not made a drum out of alligator or stingray. I have seen shark, people who have done it out of shark. I have not either because I don't live by the ocean and I don't live by alligators. So acquiring that without it drying out, but it would basically go straight from the animal skin to the drum. Probably the most exotic I have is zebra. I'm like, I even have to make this sound. I'm just like, oh. And cougar, all ethically sourced with the meat utilized, all the regulations. I have the tags and the proof and all the things, know where they were harvested. I think the African buffalo, it has been a really beautiful piece to work with because it still has the snout and everything attached on the drum. Probably my favorite, which is semi-exotic, is a caribou because it still has the fur on. And there's a really beautiful, just inspiring story that's in my book, actually, of a dear friend who he actually harvested the caribou and it chose him and that whole story. And then within a year of making the drum, he had crossed over and through some really painful circumstances. And he shared his rawhide with me. So he made one, his wife made one, and I got to make one too. And I was just going to help them make theirs. And they're like, can we all make smaller ones so there's enough for you to have one too? And it actually sounds like a really soft subwoofer and sheds a lot. So usually the hair is removed. But those are probably some of the more exotic ones. But for me, that drum is connected with him. It's connected with the story of making a little room so that everybody gets to feel nourished, and the connection with his wife. And she's a dear, dear friend. We've had beautiful sacred journeys together. So every time I drum that drum, I can't even mention that drum without that story. So even the stories around creating our drums are an energy frequency that come through every time we get to experience with them. It's really phenomenal when we think of all of the possibilities of connection and the layers of imprinting that happen. It goes beyond just rare animals. But yeah, I would love to try an alligator. So maybe I'll go to Florida and try one.
Well, I would just be so curious about the frequency that they give, this idea of what the animal's life is like, and this idea of the alligator, like lie in wait is what comes to mind, like being patient under the water and things like that. But I just had to ask because it's a fun question to know, but I love that beautiful story.
And the alligator connects in with that belly when you look at the chakra system in Hinduism. So you're tying in with that piece as well. And one of the things I love doing is if I have leather that's been gifted to me, I can always add it to the drumstick. So I can take that same energy, because the drumstick is just as important as the drum. You can use one drumstick with several different drums as well. And you can actually have that alligator leather that you can use, and bringing in that, patiently waiting and nurturing and receiving, but we can share it with the medicine of other drums, like receiving, we're going to drum with deer. So now we're allowing our heart to be able to receive. Now we're drumming with roots. So now we're allowing ourselves to feel grounded and supported and strengthened. And so you can use different drumsticks and you can play with the different medicines and add crystals. And there's so many layers of how we can really individualize our healing that we do with the drum, depending on what we need.
That's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. Who would have thought? I think most people, when they hear the word drum, they think of like a rock band or a drummer, or they don't understand the deep medicine that's in each drum, like how healing and how personalized it is. So I really love that. Well, Hollie, our time is short, but there's so much more I want to talk to you about. We'll have to do a part 2 because we plan to talk about drumming and how it works with even sexual healing and how it can help you with that. So I think what we'll need to do is we'll need to schedule a part 2 with you, and we'll have to talk about all those wonderful, wonderful things. This has been an amazing conversation. Is there anything that you would like to leave with us about the drumming, your experience, just anything you want to leave our audience with before we go?
We most definitely will have to do a part 2. One of the things that's probably the most important is to remember that regardless of if you partnered with an animal to make a drum or have a drum to drum with, the most sacred drum you can carry is the one within your own chest. And we always have a drum within us. There are many times when I'm like, if only I had a drum. Oh, wait, I do. And even just taking your hand and drumming your chest can allow you to break up and move and really connect in. So you don't have to have something external outside of yourself to be able to activate the drum. Just drum your own heart and remember that connection that you have. And you can re-imprint just as powerful with your own drum within your chest as you can with an external one. And so, yeah, so much love. Thank you guys for letting me be on and listening. And it's just, I love sharing. So I really appreciate being able to share all of my drum love.
Oh, what powerful words. What wisdom. I love that. Do you want to let us know, Hollie, before we close up, where can we find you? Where can people enjoy you more?
So you can visit my website, holliehope.com, and that is HOLLIEHOPE. My book's on Amazon, The Sacred Healing Drum, and social media, I'm Hollie Hope or The Beauty of Perspective. You can find me as well there.
Thank you so much, Hollie. All right, you heard her. Go visit Hollie. She's amazing. As you can tell, she has so much wisdom to give, and she does amazing workshops. She helps people make drums. She does drum circles. She does all these healing modalities, like so many healing modalities. So go find Hollie, and until then, we'll see you next week. Bye.